Your summer starts now with Memorial Day deals at the Home Depot. It's time to fire up summer cookouts with the Next Grill 4-burner gas grill on special buy for only $199. And entertain all season with the Hampton Bay West Grove 7-piece outdoor dining set for only $499. This Memorial Day, get low prices guaranteed at the Home Depot. While supplies last, price and valid May 14th through May 27th. U.S. only, exclusions apply. See homedepot.com/price match for details.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
I think the big part of playing defensive football in the red zone, we don't get to define these zones as a defense. We get to start playing our stuff when they start changing. And it's from a scouting standpoint and a preparation standpoint as a coach. When does the quarterback start keeping the ball? When are the called QB runs? When does the throw game get horizontal? When do the formations change?
Welcome to the Coaching Coordinator Podcast presented by Modern Football Technology. Modern football helps coaches turn data into insight. From game planning to self-scouting to weekly preparation, Modern football gives staffs the tools to see tendencies, understand context, and make faster, more informed decisions. Today, I'm joined by Dan Carrel. Dan has been on the podcast a number of times, including a full season where we talked ball every week. He coached at the pro level, college level, and now is coaching high school football in Alabama. Dan brings a really practical perspective because he's seen the game from so many different levels. And in this episode, we're talking about something he said before we hit record. Situational football is every down. We get into why every snap has context, how to teach players beyond just the playbook, how to make practice more efficient, and how to build drill work that actually shows up on game day. We also talk about preparing for base downs, third downs, red zone, 2-minute, 4-minute, and special situations that can decide games. Coach Carrel also shares more on the upcoming No Free Yards defensive clinic, where we're going deeper into situational defensive football and how to prepare players to win the downs that matter most. Let's get into the episode with Coach Dan Carrel.
You said this place was steps from the water.
We just haven't found the steps yet.
How much did we save?
Enough.
Enough to get lost?
Or you could book a stay with Hilton.
Welcome to your oceanfront room, just steps from the water.
The Hilton sale is on now. Book on Hilton.com or the Hilton app and save up to 20% to get the stay you expected. When you want savings, not surprises, it matters where you stay. Hilton, for the stay.
On today's episode of the Coaching Coordinator Podcast, presented by Modern Football Technology, we're going to be talking about the context of the game. And joining me is someone who has been on this podcast quite a bit, spent a whole season with us, talking ball each week of the season. A few years ago, has been on some clinics that we do, et cetera. Is Dan Carrel, who has been at the pro level, the college level, now is coaching high school ball in Alabama, which obviously Alabama, very competitive in high school football as well. So Dan, it's great to have you back on the podcast.
It's great to be here. Really excited to get an opportunity to share with you today and talk about something that's really important to me, and that's the situations and context and preparing a defense to play through all those.
Yeah, before we got going, you pointed out something. I think that it's a good statement. You know, situational football is every down. There is context in every single play. And, you know, I had shared with you, remember in high school football when I played, that we'd wear out, you know, whatever it might be, the middle of the field, 35-yard line, because that damn ball never moved. It would just go back to the same spot and we just ran plays. Well, the fact of the matter is, whether that was, you know, in 1987 or right now, whether it's high school football, college football, pro football, or youth football, the game is played within context. So every down is a situational down. And the best way to prepare players is to teach them that the game is played in context.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember we had a few lines out in right field in high school. We just put the ball on one of those lines and gave you some context of depth of 5, 10, 15 yards. And we just created a crater out there in the middle of right field without, understanding hashes or really practicing a whole lot of D&D or, field zones or anything like that. And yeah, the term situational football, as we tend to use it, usually a lot of times for a lot of coaches and a lot of staffs, it means third down, it means red zone, it might mean 2 minute. But the truth is, every time the ball's snapped, there's some situation and there's some context that should be provided, whether it's base downs, whether it's field zone related, whether it's hash related. I mean, you can get a lot, especially in high school, the way the hashes are for most of us, not in the state of Texas at least, that we have wide hashes. And so there's always something that can be provided a context. And obviously, it's got to be careful not to overload players, but there is a context of every time the ball snapped and what we should be looking at and what we need to be preparing our guys for. And some of it might be subconscious a little bit, as far as maybe we don't say a lot of it, but, we always move the pocket from the defensive right hash because 90% of the time, that's the way they're going to do it, right? They're going to roll to the quarterback's arm. And I might not say that all the time, but, our guys kind of get a feel for that. Ball's on the right hash in a certain field zone, like expect move the pocket play. So, but there's always context, and we always need to be providing that to get the most out of each snap.
Yeah, you're going through it right now in spring ball, and so we put, our installs, and for you it's the first time there, so guys are learning. How quickly do you tend to try to get to the context of the game? I mean, we want to install the concepts, right? And so sometimes we start layering in the context, whether this is, for something we do on base downs, third downs, red zone, whatever. But for you, how quickly, especially at the high school level, have you moved into getting into the different situations?
Yeah, I laid out the entire defense that way in the very beginning. Maybe the second week I was on the job in February, we started looking at what the scheme would look like and saying, hey, these are going to be the base down, 1st and 10 to second and medium calls that we will play, and they're grouped this way, they're termed this way. Here's kind of what our third down package looks like. Here's what we'd play in the red zone. Here's some adjustments we would make for 2 minute, add a little column for 4 minute, backed up, and kind of went through those situations and just said, look, this is what you tend to see. Right. This is what we would practice in these situations, and tried to, going from the idea of whole part whole, like this is what the defense looks like. It's not a list of calls that we have or schemes that we have. It's a grid of what we would play and typically play in these situations. And, there's a lot of context though that's not scheme related. I mean, just learning formations. We generally play a decent amount of split safety defense. So we talk about half field pictures. So there's a lot of context we get from that. I mean, what are you seeing as a safety, managing your half of the field? What do you see? And we name all those, you can get a slot side, a pro side, a tray side, a trip side, a split side, in any iteration of that. And that provides context as well, right? That provides context to what's about to happen. I mean, you play offenses that tight end in the core, their percentage of run goes up dramatically. So if I'm a safety and I'm making half field calls that have to include a tight end in the core, in my head, I'm starting to think, all right, this might be a run set. It's probably a run set. What did the D&D tell me with that, right? I got a pre-snap process. I'm try not to take credit for anything I didn't come up with, but so Patrick Toney, who's with the Falcons now, he did a clinic a while back, and just preparing DBs, scan, zoom, snap is kind of their pre-snap process. And the scan included, hey, we're going to scan for D&D, we're going to scan for formation, we're going to scan to get the call, D&D, formation, splits, like all of that, everything in what I would tell our guys, in your scan, everything in your scan is going to provide you context for what you can expect, at least to start narrow down the things that can happen. The biggest thing I think about from a contextual standpoint is how many plays, what things can we just get rid of? We get 3rd and 9 and they're not in a situation to go for it on 4th down, like maybe they're on the minus 35. We can probably rule out counter, right? Like we could probably rule out some stuff. So let's get this thing narrowed down based on formation, based on situation to it's probably going to be A or B. If it's C, we'll react to it and we'll play it, but can we get it down to, hey, it's probably A or B in this situation based on what they're showing us and in the context of D&D and field zone?
Yeah. So with your high school guys, what's the implementation been like getting them to think about the defense that way?
from our perspective, I'm coaching the DBs, I have the whole secondary. I feel pretty fortunate. A lot of these guys hadn't played, but they understand some of that stuff pretty well. And they're very receptive to learn it. I've noticed over the years, college guys, pro guys, high school guys, if you give them something that they really feel gives them an edge where they can play ahead of the play, they're very receptive to it and really try hard to learn it and understand it. You know, when it's just, hey, this is what we do, you don't always seem to get, you know, we're going to play palms in this situation, or we're going to spin to 3 in this situation. Guys know they need to learn it, and they learn it, but you don't seem to get the intensity to get it figured out, because it's just a call to them, right? They don't see it as something that's really going to help them, you know, be in position to make plays and have success. So I think the biggest thing is creating that urgency in those guys to learn the situations, learn the implications of it, to be dialed into it and understand the value of it. And it's been good. And we've gone through everything. We still have to get a 4-minute period in, but we've done 2-minute. We've had a lot of success, red zone, and understanding how things change in the red zone and why we're in different calls and different structures when we get there, you know. And I think keeping those bullet points tight of, hey, you know, what happens in the red zone, right? You have to always account for the quarterback as a runner. The throws get more horizontal, right? I mean, you can use the back line. You don't have to stay deeper than the deepest, right? You can play ball me man instead of staying on top of vertical routes, and just understanding those subtleties. And, you know, it's put our guys in good positions. And I think that some matchups that we haven't had success on in base down situations, in certain third down and red zone, you know, we've had some success because our guys have really bought into the situations.
I've had a very limited amount of work with the guys that I'm going to be working with this fall. But one of the biggest things, you know, in the first time we put something out there for them is, you know, everybody wants the diagram of the play. Coach, can we see that? You know, you're going to get that to us, whatever. So, you know, you draw something up for them and then explain it to them like, guys, like, this line is devoid of so much meaning of what's going to happen to you when you take it out on the field. You know, you can't be out here running around like robots. I don't want robots. Like, the line is kind of a map, right? It's like using a map or GPS. Like, there's going to be all kinds of stuff that happens in front of you that you adjust to. You got to change lanes. You got to stop. Some idiots, you know, on your ass. You have to speed up and get over whatever it might be. There's going to be a ton of things, we're talking about context, within that play that you have to learn. And I emphasize to him, like, I can, you know, work to make the perfect call, but, you know, I will not make the perfect call every time. I'm going to do my best. If I teach you the right way and how to win this play, regardless of if I made a bad call, we got a chance. But it relies on you knowing more than I'm just running a post here. Like, how are you gonna win route side space? How do you break that route? How do you know who has the leverage inside of you, who could take it away? And so much goes into this, and it got me thinking, like, what is the value of a playbook? How much value does it really have? You know, it gives you a starting point, I think. But after that, man, it's a ton of teaching. And then it goes to, well, how thick should that be then? Because if there's a ton of teaching, I only have so much time, right?
Yeah, there's a lot that I can unpack there. One thing is a lot of young players, and we have some really, really good young players in our program that are going to be freshmen and sophomores. And I know that their coaches growing up and kind of the, you know, parents, whatever, it's all, you need to learn the plays. Coach, I know the plays. Well, listen, knowing the plays is ground zero for being able to play. I mean, that is the bottom, that is the foundation, that is the bottom layer of the bricks, guys. Like, the understanding all the things that can happen. And I've said this for years. I don't want to be the PowerPoint coach. I don't want to put the PowerPoint up and say, hey, man, hey, you know, we got quarters here. You got two, corners got one. We're going to play palms, make sure we're reading two. It's like, tell me what's going to happen when the ball snapped and we're in this call. That, to me, is the value of the coach. So, hey, when two goes out and you snap eyes back to one and we're in palms, if he's vertical, we have him. If he's stalking you, you've got to set the edge. If he is on an inside stem, right, the safety's got to grab it, right? I mean, just the variety of things that can happen. And then if you get a skip release, right, and if they push, or if we're reading two in palms, I just stay on that example, but and he pushes just to the depth of the nickel and out, like who's got it, all these things that are going to mess with you, all these situations that are going to come up. What happens when they motion, right, that doesn't show up on the PowerPoint? And if it does, your PowerPoint's probably 70 slides. And if that's the case, you have bored them to death, in my opinion, in my experience. So yeah, that's the playbook. Hey, here's the schematic. I used to think of that as a young coach, that people would want to draw something up versus 2x2 and 3x1 and just leave it go. And I was like, man, we leave out all these things. And it's like, well, that's what they need coached on. And that's what they need. They themselves need to draw in their notebook. What happens when we motion over, right? What happens when we get unbalanced? What happens in this situation? Those are the things that actually need to happen in the meeting, not the reciting of the PowerPoint and of the schematic, because that's what the game is, right? It's not played with lines on a drawing. It's played with people who move and change, and very rarely do you get the static look and the static picture of, matching Ohio route in Palms, or, matching dagger in Palm. Like, very rarely, right? You get it out of a stack, you get they motioned over, you get the same concept, but it was 3x, and so there's another element to it. And just those are the things from a preparation standpoint that, I strive to do as a coach, and certainly fall short at times, but just understanding that it's not going to be the PowerPoint and the lines on the board. It's going to be what they know when they're out there.
Yeah, it's going to be the language you set up to communicate that too, right? And we got to be out there. We can't communicate. We certainly can't communicate in paragraphs. Sometimes it's not even sentences. You need those one or two phrases that are those key words that kind of helps them get to where they need to be, and get things right.
Yeah, I mean, language is everything to me. And that's one thing I'm learning with these guys, and really trying to hold them accountable to, is just, I want you to say, when I ask you what you have in this coverage, or ask you what you have in this half field call, or ask you what you have in this call, you say exactly what I say. And to do that, though, I can only say it one way. I've got to have the most concise and clear and clean way to say it. And I have to believe in that way to say it, or I'll revert to something else. And if I don't believe in the way we're saying it, I'll get in the middle of that meeting and I'll say it completely different. So I've got to fix my language, make it as clear and clean and concise as I can. And then when I get in a meeting, that's how it's going to come out of my mouth. And that's going to be the expectation for how it comes out of the player's mouth when I ask them. And I think at times maybe that sounds semantical. And I know I've coached some guys who had a hard time, over the years in college football. I coached some guys that maybe had a hard time just words like that, and then they don't communicate as well, whatever. But to demand that is how they're able to recite back to us and say exactly what we say, and, teach directly to them and have them teach it back to us. That is at least where, if we're all on the same page, accountability can occur. It's very hard to hold guys accountable when you don't have them on the same page. If you're not teaching it directly to them, if you're not making them say it back to you, I mean, should they know it? You want to hold them accountable for what they know. Like, we need to make sure that we've given them the opportunity in a clean language and clean verbiage that they should know. We can expect that. Where sometimes I'm as guilty of it as anybody. I've said things a different way or a couple of different ways. And then it's, you look back and you're like, well, I mean, if you don't know it, if you don't have one way to do it or exact way to say it and do it, then why would you expect them to?
I want to take a minute to thank our presenting sponsor, Modern Football Technology. A big theme in this conversation is context. The down and distance, field zone, hash, formation, personnel, and tendencies. The game's not played on a blank diagram, it's played with information. And that's where Modern Football Technology fits. Modern Football helps coaches organize the information that matters so you can prepare with purpose during the week instead of guessing at what matters. Your staff can identify tendencies, build smarter game plans, and give your players insight they can actually use on game day. Modern Football is the only in-game analytics platform that works at the speed of the game. Whether you're looking at self-scout, opponent tendencies, situational football, or just trying to make your weekly prep more efficient, Modern Football gives coaches a better way to connect data and decisions. Learn more at modernfootball.com or click the link in the description. So flipping the switch a little bit and taking a look at practice time and what we do with our practice time, whether, starting looking at individual periods, group periods, team periods. And I've had, Sean Mishka on the last few weeks. He'll be on again. And, he gets murdered on X for, giving his opinion on a certain drill or whatever. But he's got some really good points in skill development. And he's definitely now through, it's been years talking to Sean. I think you first had him on in year one of the podcast, which is 10 years ago, and multiple times since, and read his stuff and see what he's doing, that I got this filter now. And I really worry about, is this the most efficient drill I can use to teach something? And what do I need to layer into this drill as that skill is taught? Because again, I think it goes back to, when am I using these certain things, right? When do these things happen on the field? And ultimately, that's it. He made a joke about somebody had, I think it was a defensive drill. They had the foam donut rolling with a bungee strapped into it and a guy punching it, and made a joke about this. This is for the trick play that happens when they roll a foam donut out on the field. So the point being, though, I think we might waste a lot of time. I know I looking at what I've done in the past, there's things I probably wouldn't do that way anymore. So I think we have to have this filter too of what are we doing in practice? And I think the challenge, for me coming in and sharing some of this philosophy with new coaches is, kind of guys looking at you what are you talking about? My point simply is kind of what we began this with is the game's played in context. What we do in drills damn well better appear somewhere on the film. Otherwise, we're wasting time. So thoughts on that, and I guess things that you've leaned towards in the way that you structure a practice.
So I'm going to try hard not to leave anything out because I could say a lot about this topic. Number one, I feel very strongly about the concept of backward design. If you were ever in, education, and, this is my first time in a high school since I was a student teacher 15 years ago. So, but I do remember that was something that stuck with me, and essentially it's just maybe a higher ed version or higher ed way to say start with the end in mind. So if we're planning the practice effectively, and we're going to culminate in a team period that is going to require us to play, let's say, red zone. All right. So then let's think back. Are group periods putting us in situations that we're going to see in the red zone period? Or is our indie work, whether it's footwork drill, whether it's how we're doing block destruction that day, is that going to be stuff that's going to show up in those situations? And so let's always keep that in context. And are we doing drill work that shows up, does our base developer drill work show up in the game? We backpedal a lot as DBs, okay? Do we do enough of that? And do we do it in context? I saw Blake Gideon had a clinic a while back talking about he doesn't ever use cones. He uses nothing other than potentially ball keys with the DBs when they're backpedaling. And that was, I felt a little bit I need to get rid of the cones. It makes a lot of sense, right? Let's get rid of the cones. Let's create some spatial awareness, right, in our everyday fundamental and drill work. One of the best things when it comes to this, I think we did, and this when I was at Coastal Carolina, we went back. We had a decent year taking the football away in 2023. We'd improved the defense pretty drastically over the previous year and felt good about it, but we weren't getting the takeaways. And a couple of us had been on staff at a previous place where we led the country in takeaways. And we're like, man, how do we get back to that? And so we really evaluated basically every play from the season and see where did we miss opportunities to get the ball. And so we created drills around those. We created drills around those things. And one of them that, just very specifically, we probably had what we looked at as 15 opportunities to get a shot on the ball, and we said we probably could have got 4 or 5 of them, was a nickel sets the edge on the perimeter, or a backer who's walked out sets the edge on the perimeter, ball cuts inside of him, and then he retraces vertically, and the ball's in the outside arm typically, and then he goes and hunts the ball with a punch or a rib, right? So we created that drill. And we had 2 or 3 times it showed up in the game in 2024, and we were able to, stuff like that is not how many did we get out, but it's how many shots did we get on it? Did we train that habit? Did we train a guy that, hey, you set the edge, ball passes you, you retrace, and in your mind, look, you turn the ball back to where you need to. There's probably an unblocked defender there. In your mind, you're hunting the ball. And that's what we're trying to get. And I do that drill here, and I had a great clip the other day, safety ran the alley, they blocked out on him, he retraces and his hand goes right to the hand that was on the ball for the back. And again, we didn't get that one out either, but we're training the habit, right? We're training the motion. We're training that hey, if I get into a situation, I leverage the ball and retrace, I'm hunting the football. And so, but just what is happening in the game film and how do we recreate that in a small situation, an individual, then how do we expand that and create it in a little bit bigger situation in a group period? And then how do we make sure we're seeing that when we go team? And obviously when you have a scout team and whatnot, you can do a better job maybe recreating some things that, maybe your offense doesn't give you. But I think that just that evaluation constantly of saying, is this drill helping us? And if it is, what's it helping us with? And where does it show up? That's one of my favorite things to do, is to go through, I keep all our drill work in, cut up in columns and go through when something shows up like the drill on the field and just dump it in with the drill work. So if you go into, our tackle circuit or our ball disruption circuit, you'll see 26 clips of us doing near hand bat drill where we're blitzing or we're using the D-line, we're batting the ball. And then at the bottom, you'll see 6 or 8 clips of the ball getting batted, right? Because I always want to be able to show players and show myself that, hey, what we're doing shows up when we play. And if I pull up one of those cut-ups and there's no evidence, then let's recreate the drill. Like, it might not be a bad drill, but it might not be exactly what we need. Right. So, and I think in the context of tackling, like, one thing I realized over the years, I was spending, as a linebacker coach in college, I was spending way too much time profile tackling in practice, like onto a mat, guys just standing there still, and we're just, whacking them, and everybody's getting their shoulder where it needs to be and their foot where it needs to be. And, the drill looks good and we're dumping them on the mat. And it's like, I can go back and count on one hand how many times we missed a profile tackle. And of those times, how many times did it really hurt us? Usually the next guy just knocks it down another yard or two later. But what I can tell you is when we failed to vice tackle correctly, when we had 2 guys breaking down to an underneath route or a check down, we failed to vice tackle correctly. And usually when you do that, that's a big gain, right? That hurts you. You lose games by doing that, right? You give up a critical third down doing that. And, we failed to set an edge on a blocker. 2 guys, it's, we do a drill here called 2-on-2 where there's a blocker and a ball carrier trailing him, and then the blocker picks a guy at the last second. Now we got to get an edge and we got to get it forced. And if we don't get the edge, the guy will bounce it. If we do get the edge, then the next guy should tack the near hip and near shoulder tackle. Like, those things happen all the time, right? There's a blocker, guy jumps inside. Now we got 2 in there, back goes out on the outside. No, we don't have force, we don't have leverage, right? So it's like, I've tried to go back and create by position in just general defensive football, what are the tackling situations that actually kill us? Like, we miss a profile tackle in the A gap. Usually the next guy's there and knocks him down for +3, right? Live to play the next down. Maybe on the goal line, it might hurt you, but 4-minute drive, it might hurt you. But for the most part, we get those guys on the ground. And if we don't, usually it's not a big deal. But all those other situations that show up, and how do we, can you ever really, really create the game situation? Maybe not, but the absolute best you can and put those guys. And it's also on teaching the players. Right? Hey, this is what we're practicing. We're practicing for when they run jet sweep with the back leading out and we have nickel and a Mike. All right. And nickel's going to punch down and set the edge on the back, and the Mike's got to make the play. All right. That's one of those situations that the 2-on-2 drill works. So, I mean, just providing the context to the players when they're doing the drill, which I think is a big part of all of it, and reminding them, some of these guys don't, they might not understand it. You might say, hey, we're going to do half field drill with the safeties. Okay. And what I didn't say, and this is really a true story, is like, this is when we are in cloud, right? Like, when you, as the safety, made the cloud call, this is our technique. This is our half field technique, right? Because even say, hey, this half field drill, okay, we're backpedaling. We have a number 1 receiver releasing, and we're getting width based on the release. And it's like, coach, was that like palms? It's like, no, No, not really, because there's no two out there. Who are you even reading? And it's like, listen, when you make a cloud call, this is what we do. This is the techniques, and then it makes, again, just provide that extra context.
Yeah. Well, I love that idea of just having those plays that you drop into there and really coming to that realization, like this isn't happening, right? Making those adjustments. I think that's our responsibility as a coach. I mean, too many times it's like thinking, well, the guys didn't perform it right. Well, are we teaching it right? And I think all of that's reflection, right? And having your information put together, being able to drop those clips in from a game. Here's where it happened. And then having that as a teach tool. Like I really got to the point where, and definitely going to do it again, like here's the drills we're running today and showing that in install and then showing them how it shows up on film, right? I think such an important part of the teaching.
Every day. I don't care if we do the drill every single day. It is in the meeting every day. And just coach something in the meeting on it. Hey, it's our back pedal drill. Hey, it's our footwork drill. We're going to start with one line back pedal. Hey, make sure, hey, we're looking chest over toes, eyes are up. I want to be able to see your eyes when you're doing a drill. Next clip, right? Even if it's that quick, I think it's good for players just to provide a little bit of, hey, they don't get surprised by what you're going to do. And there's a time and place to surprise them. I mean, there's sudden change periods. There's things they got to be on their toes for. But if we're trying to get the most out of the drill, coach it in a meeting. If you have an opportunity to walk through drills, walk through them, right? And then when the time comes, you don't spend much time doing that when it should be go time, right? I don't want to spend go time teaching drills, okay? And I don't want to spending too much time out there coaching up what to do in the drill. Like we can coach that in a meeting, and you're going to coach the guy on the side who makes mistakes. You're going to make a guy go over and repeat it, but just mitigate as much of that as you can by saying, hey, we taught in a meeting. We told you exactly what we're looking for. This is how we're striking. This is the purpose of this. We're trying to get leverage with this guy. We're trying to track the hip with this guy, whatever. And I think that the value of doing that before you get out there, is a time saver. We can get off the field really fast. We get a lot of work done and get off the field really fast because we're organized in what we do pre-practice. And we use time, and we get a decent amount of time with our guys based on, their classes and having an athletic period and whatnot. But, we use it pretty efficiently. So we're not on the practice field for 3.5 hours to get done what you can get done in 2 if you're organized and prepared. I think that's always the key when people talk about, we're off the practice field an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes. And, you look at them like, how? And it's, well, how much time do they spend in the meeting? How much time do they spend preparing for the practice? How organized is the practice? Like, you'd be surprised what you can get done, or what you're not getting done based on your level of organization. Because I've seen it from both ends.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it takes me to the last part here. Hinted at some of the things that we're putting together, and we have a clinic coming up, defensive clinic under your brand. I'll talk about that in a little bit. No free yards. And we're talking about situational football and preparing for it, practicing it, game planning it, adjustments, all those kinds of things. And, you and I started talking about this a few years ago in the clinic space and what can we do in the virtual world to, utilize the tools better and make most use of the time and dive deeper, really, because I think we go to some of these clinics and we get, a mile wide and an inch deep. And, we want the opposite here. We really want to drive deep on a singular topic and do some interactive things, right? We've got this habit now of coaches, anytime there's a virtual clinic, you just go get it on demand. So we have a good portion of it. 15 of our 18 sessions are actually on demand. Once you buy the ticket, you have the access to them, go dig into it. And then we have 3 live sessions we're putting together. And we did one of these with the RPO Symposium. Offensive coaches who are listening, I'll link that if you hadn't heard about it. But just an incredible job of really getting into the depth of how these guys do it, how they put RPO in. And now we're doing the same thing with defense, and getting to this time of the year, it's like, well, what do you learn? And I think now we get more into the application. People spend a lot of time in, January, February, March, getting ideas, looking at scheme. Now it's really more about, whatever scheme you use, let's work on your thought process. Let's work on how you put things together. And that's the idea behind this one. So I'll let you dig into it a little bit and talk to our listeners about what we put together.
Yeah. So we kind of split up some of the main situations. There's going to be a topic of base down defense. kind of what you're looking for, how you game plan it, how we practice it, what the situation, what is base down, right? Where does that stop? And that also has some context of field zone in it as well. Third down defense, obviously the splitting that up into your shorts, mediums, longs, extra longs, and really diving into how to prepare guys in each of those situations and really what you should expect. What does success look like? What does success look like in third and short, third and medium, third and long? I think those are really important things to understand. I always look at that like, hey, third and short, they got the advantage. Third and long, we have the advantage. Third and medium is where we can really make a difference in our ability to get off the field, right? That's really they got more of their playbook open. We can use more of ours. And how do we out prepare them and do a better job than they do to win those situations on game day? And then from there, red zone, just talking a little bit about, it becomes very personnel driven in the red zone and just who they're trying to get the ball to. How do they change? I think the big part of playing defensive football in the red zone, we don't get to define these zones as a defense. We get to start playing our stuff when they start changing. And that's from a scouting standpoint and a preparation standpoint as a coach. When does the quarterback start keeping the ball? When are the called QB runs? When does the throw game get horizontal? When do the formations change? Those are the type of things that we need to look at to have the best representation of what their red zone offense is and how we prepare for that. And then we're going to have somebody, this would be some information on how we game plan it and kind of tie it all together, right? To make sure we're not, building out a whole scheme for base downs and building out a whole scheme for third down and building out a whole scheme for red zone. And then you look at it together and you got, 25 calls in for a game, which, would probably be a little bit much. And also some special situations, right? I talk about, the special situations are the ones that won't be in every game. Okay, so we'll have base downs in every single game. You'll have red zone in every single game, and you'll have third down in every single game. But you may not have 2-minute in every game. You may not have 4-minute in every single game. So what are we doing to make sure we stay up on those? But a lot of times these special situations are the ones that are so important. I mean, if you can go back to years, I coached a season, I want to say it was 2017 at the University of Houston, where 7 or 8 of our games were won or lost in a 2-minute drive. And obviously the value that showed up a lot that season, the previous seasons and seasons thereafter, it's usually, between 3 and 4. But are we making sure, preseason and fall camp that we're really, greased up on those things? And then how do we prepare week to week for something that, if you don't know it's going to show up, you might not be able to spend as much time on it. So how do we make sure, even though we don't spend as much time on 2 minutes, we do red zone, that we're ready to play it? And then other situations I'll touch on that are, near and dear to me is obviously defending option and wing T and those special offenses that only show up kind of, maybe show up once or twice a year. And a lot of times they're very pivotal games, and teams that run them, at least in the college level. I know at the University of Houston, we always felt every year like we had to beat Navy to play for a conference championship. If we couldn't beat Navy, we couldn't play for a conference championship because they were always going to be in the hunt, and you lose that game and, you would struggle to do that. So it was always a big deal for us there. And that's probably like that for a lot of teams. And just mastering these situations. And I think the overall theme is not, your scheme's not the problem, probably not at least. Your players probably aren't the biggest problem, and even at this point in the year, they're probably not changing that much. But how do we think about the game a little bit differently? Like how do we go from, thinking about the PowerPoint and thinking about the next thing and the blitz that's going to get home and the coverage that'll stop, whatever this and that, to preparing guys, using what we do and preparing the guys to match the routes they're going to see in red zone. Match the routes they're going to see in third down. Rush versus the protection they're going to see that within the context of the stuff we already have. So I think that's where most staffs probably are this time of year. I think that's what, truthfully, the more you learn and the more I've learned over the years from some of the best coaches that, I couldn't be more fortunate with the people I've worked with, and that it's really going to be so much more about how you do it, what you teach, the language, and really what the players are learning, which means that the meeting and indie and group work and the team periods, they all have to align, because they're not going to learn it if those things don't align. So if what we're saying in the meeting is what we're repping in Indy, and it's what we're building group work around, and then it's what shows up in team. And all that stuff aligns in the same language, in the same situations, and the same things that we're preparing for align. Usually, even if, your players that may not be able to recite back to you, may not be the people that know football the best, usually at least they're developing some understanding of what they're going to see for that week.
And in addition to you presenting at this, you've put together a great lineup of guys. As we said before, these guys will dig deep, each of them presenting for approximately 2 hours, 2.5 hours, somewhere in that range. And I think just a phenomenal group that you've put together too. Talk a little bit about who we're going to see on this clinic.
Yeah, Adam Harvey being one guy, I was really excited, said yes, known Adam for a long time. If you've been around kind of football content and had the no-fly zone chat on social media on X for many years and did a phenomenal job with that. But been at Steele, I got to know him when he was a co-DC at Steele High School, probably, I guess that's been 10 years. I guess as a coach and you're in the wind tunnel, it seems like it was about 3 months ago, but great coach. Excited that he's going to be there and do that with us. Some guys I've worked with in the past, Joe Montag, he's currently defensive assistant at Northwestern. He'd been a defensive coordinator in D2 and in FCS, and worked with him at Houston and New Mexico. Just a guy who loves football. I mean, he's really just a football guy. I've got a lot of friends in coaching. A lot of times you call guys and sometimes the conversation becomes about family, becomes about summertime, raising kids. I called Joe, and usually about 30 seconds in, we're talking about, something they're doing in quarters or something that they're doing in cover 3 or the new trend in pass rush. It's always football. And I'm so excited for him to get a chance to share that. Adam Weber's a DC at Carthage College up in Wisconsin. He does an awesome job. He and I worked together in 2013 at Ohio State. He's been around some of the best coaches in the country on staffs there, and then at Rutgers, and now he gets to run his own defense. And Eric Kasperwitz is a head coach in the Pittsburgh area, and he's also been a college coach, coached at Pitt as well, and had a ton of success as a head football coach and a defensive guy as a head football coach. So really excited about those guys and what they've put together. Some guys have already, we've already been talking through it and just what they're doing, and I think it'll be very valuable for anybody that's interested in get a different perspective. And I think that is probably the most important part. I don't feel strong about telling somebody how to do something. I think everybody's situation's a little bit different, but I think you get a different perspective and you see how somebody thinks and you're able to apply that to what you do and what you already have, what your players are capable of. And I always believe that in this game, we're a few tweaks away from being a lot better. Whether it's offense, whether it's defense, we're a few tweaks away. We're a little bit drill work with this position group. We're a little bit how we coach this coverage. We're a little bit being a little bit more demanding on these guys and a little bit more context from a situational standpoint, we're a few things away from really improving. Not going to say you're going to go out and win a state championship by doing it, but you can make your unit a lot better with a few tweaks. And I think that's what, as you approach this, that's what I hope guys get out of it.
I'm excited for it. I know you guys have started working on this, putting things together. We will announce a keynote speaker as well soon, and the page will be up here. If it's not, keep watching coachingcoordinator.com for that, but should be here in the near future. So, Dan, I appreciate you taking the time, talking ball with us again. It's always great to talk ball with you. I loved that whole season that we did. Learned so much from you then, and I'm excited to learn from you in this clinic as well.
I appreciate it, Keith. This is a good 45-minute reprieve from the rest of my day, and I look forward to any time we get to get on here and talk football.
Thanks for listening to the Coaching Coordinator podcast presented by Modern Football Technology. I appreciate Coach Carrel joining me today and sharing how he thinks about situational football, defensive preparation, practice structure, and teaching players to understand the game beyond the lines in the playbook. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to keep an eye out on coachingcoordinator.com for our upcoming No Free Yards clinic. It's one of our smart clinics where we dive deep into a singular topic, and this one is situational defensive football, with coaches sharing how they prepare, practice, game plan, and adjust. You can also find more coaching education through Coach and Coordinator Network and our ongoing Smart Clinics, where we go deeper on specific topics with coaches who are teaching the game every day. And again, thank you to Modern Football for presenting this episode today. If you're looking for a better way to study tendencies, prepare for opponents, make clearer decisions in-game for your staff and players, visit modernfootball.com to book a demo. Follow us on X at Coach K. Grabowski.